This is the Chicano Moratorium presentation done by Valeria and Hugh.
The term origin.
Chicano was a negative term that was used for low-class Mexican American in the barrios before the Chicano movement, most likely dated back in 1930s and 1940s. It later became a term of a new identity created by Mexican descent during the Chicano movement, and they took pride in it. Vietnam War is a war between communists of North Vietnam and South Vietnam versus the US, and it is a part of the Cold War. US casualties reached 15,000 killed and 100,000 wounded, approximately by 1967 in November.
Due to the casualties, soldiers started to distrust the government, rebel against soldiers and officers of their own due to the physical and psychological change, while the government kept telling that the victory is coming to them. From June 1966 to December 1973, 503,000 U.S. military personnel left and resulted in violence, mass incarceration, stationed in Vietnam as well as within U.S.
In October 1967, 35,000 people protested outside the Pentagon for the anti-Vietnam War, one of the prominent anti-war demonstrations, having the idea that civilians are the ones that are victimized and required to help the corrupt dictator in Saigon.
In 1968, on Lunar New Year, Tet Offensive was launched on more than 100 cities and towns in South Vietnam and shocked the U.S. and South Vietnamese armies and U.S. public. The Tet Offensive made many Americans question whether U.S. military could win over communists on foreign land and finish the war as quick as possible, as the President Johnson admitted told and could believe in the war effort. Peace talks between US and North Vietnam didn't work out until 1973. Nixon, president then, passed a program that withdrew US troops and left the South Vietnam with weapons and training to fight alone and increased bombing continuously. Anti-war protests continue to rise as the conflict attains. Hundreds of protests and marches throughout the country after the My Lai massacre that got 400 innocent people killed in March 1968. The government got Americans divided into an anti-war side and a support the government side.
Chicano movement is a social, political, and cultural movement created to fight for equality and social justice for Mexican Americans, like restoration and land grants, farmer rights, enhanced education, voting, and political rights for embracing a new identity among Mexican descent, empowering the Chicano/Chicana politically, turned the term Chicano from being negative as an N-word from African Americans to a title of identity of many that established the movement that took pride in it. There are four main parts of the movement. Number one, farm workers movement. Two, youth movement against discrimination in schools, the anti-war movement. Three, the movement for political empowerment. Four, the movement for land grant restoration in the Southwest.
The Chicano Moratorium started during the anti-Vietnam War movement due to the effect of the undeclared Vietnam War on Chicano community. While the population of Mexican Americans only takes 10%, 20% of the casualties are of them. Besides, the high school dropout rates in Chicanos were high due to discrimination in schools, which lured more of them for the draft. And funding in President Johnson's War on Poverty were used as part of the war effort that could have been funded for social and economic programs in the barrios, which the Chicanos took the war as part of their own issues and were against it.
On August 29, 1970, the march reached to 35,000 demonstrators at Laguna Park, mainly participated by Chicano youth. It was the highest in all of the moratorium marches. The marches were led by two parties included Brown Berets, inspired by the Black Panther Party, a militant organization with the goal of self-defense, against police brutality, and Adelitas de Azatlan, a short-lived Chicano organization, separated from the Brown Berets due to heavy gender inequality issues, and by the three main movements. Activists of the moratorium included Rosalio Muñoz, Raúl Ruiz, Gloria Arellanes.
The march soon ended in violence and chaos, though started peaceful due to police brutality from the LAPD that got many arrested and four died, which one of whom was Ruben Salazar, an important news person for the event. He is a columnist for the LA Times and a news director of KMEX, covering news for the Mexican American community and spreading the awareness of the movement for bigger audience. The impact.
The moratorium was a great example of willingness and dedication towards being against the war done by young Chicanos. Challenging the system was treated the minorities poorly and treated other unnecessary matters more serious that caused only damages to the people. It also built up the idea that Chicano power empowerment to the Chicano that is continued to exist as Latino power.
Part of the pressure from the anti-war movement that got the government to change the situation. The progress had been made since 1970s in the extent of civil rights achievement, but eventually fell hard and injustice and inequality started to repeat on the lives of the new Chicano generations.